Your word's all you got. It's just a microcosm of the entire shell of who you are. So if you're not going to stand up for what's right and what's wrong and the price, honor a price that you made, a trust builds contracts and builds buildings.
When you go through this life, it's a world that's ever trying to change you.
Imagine what you could accomplish if you weren't afraid to fail.
But I would say focus on progress, not perfection.
You don't need to know every step of the way of how you're going to get there. You're going to get there.
Now that's a success story.
Thanks everybody for joining us on this episode of Success Stories. Today I have a special guest, Sean Hackett, the job coordinator at Carrozza
That's us.
Plumbing out of Chicago market. Sean, thank you for being on. Hopefully I didn't butcher that name too much. I was afraid I was going to, but I think I got it close.
You hit it, Steve. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Sean, what I want to do is start you out where I started everyone else out at. And we talked a little bit pre-production, and this is going to be a much different story, I think, than what people were expecting to get into on this episode. But when you think back of your success story and your journey, your professional journey or growing up, when you tell that story, where does it begin for you?
Well, really, high school, I went to Loyola Academy. I went to public schools up until 8th grade, and then my parents were very insistent that we went and studied with the Jesuits, and my grandfather was very insistent upon that. So we went to that school, private school, and it was very different. It was, all boys at that time. And you really had to focus down and button down on what you were doing. I had to study Latin. That was the language of choice at the time, and which was wonderful because you begin to realize the derivation of so many other languages that you can now break down. So it did help me get a really, really good base for my education, for critical thinking. Because it was a very competitive environment in North Shore. Everybody, oh, what a lovely spot. Yeah, except when you're competing for education and then money. You get in a pecking order, and some people up there are some very heavy heritage, and they want what they want. You get in somebody's way up there, they'll let you know it. So it became a very competitive environment, which was fine. I then went to the Goodman School of Drama, which is a theater school. It's called the DePaul Theater School now. And I went into acting. It's conservatory. A couple thousand people auditioned. I think about 50 got accepted. One of my classmates at the time was Gillian Anderson, wonderful actress, very, very, but you want to be around a competitive individual. She was, the bomb, and she knew it. So, actually, unfortunately, my mother passed away my freshman year of college. So after my sophomore year of college, things changed. I couldn't quite be the method actor I used to be. And so I got dismissed from the school and went out to Hollywood and gave it a shot. In 1989, I lived out there for a while. And then that did not go well. That was overwhelming. So my father said, hey, why don't you come back and work with me at the Board of Trade? So I came back and started working there from 1989 to 2005. And that became my college. That became my master's degree on how to appease business customers. Because in that environment, you're standing in a pit. I mean, I went from a runner to a clerk to a broker. And the most time you're standing as a clerk and you're watching a room and JP Morgan raises their hand. And if you're not one of the first people to answer their question, you don't get that order. It's as simple as that. So you would constantly respond. You would constantly have to follow up with whatever market they were looking at, whatever detail, if they're buyers, sellers, all of the things that you needed to know. You need to follow the gold, the cash, whatever market's moving, the market that I'm following, which was 30-year bonds at the time. So you had to know what your customers' needs were. Now I sit here at my desk now and I know exactly what my customers need, FH Passion and AECOM and, those Skender, they need what they need and I know it, but I was groomed in that environment to have to know it, or you didn't get the order. So it was a neat environment. It was a lot of fun. We went through a lot of stuff. I was CEO of a brokerage group on September 11th with 10 people working for me. And we stayed open for an hour and a half after those planes hit. And we got the business of the world squared away before we closed for 3 days. But that was the most surreal, one of the most surreal experiences I could ever say. I was filling orders for Morgan Stanley, and we had to find the next market after I filled an order. And we tried to find where the next offer was because you're going from about a 6% interest rate. We went down to 1% during war. So the error was enormous. It was about $1 million, the gap between the present market bid and the offer. It was about $1 million. So we're sitting there, a bunch of traders and brokers and trying to quantify things and trying to help Everyone get their business in
Yeah.
line. So those are the moments when you realize what a precarious thing this is, every OPM, other people's money, and trying to control it, which is really what this is too. This is public funding in construction now. All the CHA stuff, all the HUD stuff that we're doing,
Mm,
this is public money that you have to be accountable for. And really, to a
right.
degree, you have to have a fiduciary responsibility in the fact that you're representing it, and not trying to rip them off.
Yeah. Yeah. So what led you? Because all that background story, automatically people are going to say, well, that leads you to a plumbing company, right?
Yeah.
So
Uh,
so how did
My
connect
uncle,
those dots? Connect those dots for me.
my uncle Pete Mangione ran Shuloff Plumbing Supply Company. um, and from the 70s on. And so when I was a kid, every summer, that's where I worked. Go work for Uncle Pete, and I worked in Glenview, but we barely made it there. My dad was just holding on. So he's like, hey, you want to go somewhere? Go get a damn job. So we'd load trucks. And so I knew all the material. I know what a scissor joint is. I know what a cottage Y is. I know what all the material is. So over time, when I left the Board of Trade in 2005, and when I mean left, I mean everything went to the computer. I had to fire
Mhm.
everybody. It was very sad. I was
Yeah.
left with some K-941 payroll taxes. Folks, pay your 941 payroll taxes. Those are unforgivable. Anyway, so um, I got a call from a guy here at Carrozza Plumbing, and while I was at Shuloff, so I'm working back at Shuloff again, and the gentleman was quoting the copper market, and so I kept giving him updates every day, every day, every day, and finally he goes, "Boy, you're pretty good at this quoting market stuff. Why don't you come and work for me?" And my brother's here too. My brother Bob is the general manager, so we both migrated from Shuloff Plumbing Supply Company to Carrozza, and so now we're working here and you know trying to build a better Chicago.
Well, what do you think? What would you say is it was your greatest influence, um,
Hmm.
growing not growing up, but on your professional career? Does it still go back to personal relationship, or is it something different?
Well, the Board of Trade, seeing those times, I worked for some really big traders. I worked for a trader named Steve Lawrence, who would commonly have thousands of contracts, an open position of a couple thousand contracts. And he was one of the largest traders. Charlie D. Francesca, Tom Baldwin, Steve Lawrence were all in this conversation of people who would hold thousands of contracts open for weeks and then go into the FOMC meeting or the unemployment number and be like, how'd you do? I made 1,500,000. But they knew why. They knew the whole cause and effect, and they had the ability since the beginning to hedge off things they didn't want to, hold on to, positions that they needed to get out of, and then let the winners run. And that was really their secret. So people like that, watching them take their ideas into fruition, analyzing what the Fed's going to do, because it's all the yield curve. The Fed's going to have the yield curve. The Fed funds are the direct inverse of the Fed funds rate. So wherever the Fed funds is, whatever the effective, the overnight rate is of after an FOMC meeting, my front month in the Fed funds is the exact inverse in the front month in that
Hmm.
month. And then it extrapolates out 3 years. So watching these people take their ideas, put them out on the market. You go ahead, you tell Morgan or Merrill Lynch they're wrong, because that's what you're essentially doing. These people, I think the
Yeah.
market's here. You're wrong, Merrill Lynch. And then 3 days later, the proof's in the pudding. And our guys were so small. It was really in the Fed funds pit. It was really quite a thing to watch these guys like Pat Dempsey and Jim Hensel, and Pat Mangan. These guys stood up against banks and industries, and again, with their own money. We didn't get
Mm.
financed by big traders or big companies that would these guys had their mortgages on the line. And I knew it, and I'm the broker with JP Morgan, and my mortgage is on the line. If I screw up, so we'd all help each other. We weren't adversaries. We were friends in that pit. And it was
Yeah.
so the Fed funds pit specifically, that time at the Fed funds pit is a huge influence on my life.
Yeah. What were some things during that you were in that position that you kind of had to learn, or might not have been ready for, where you had to learn on a fly?
Yeah, payroll, hire
Fair.
ADP, let ADP take care of, so whoever that payroll company is.
Hmm.
Because I went from 2 people up to 10, and then, yeah, that's really tough to make sure all the checks are done and all the money's out. We get paid once a month back then. And so you're sitting there trying to make sure you have everything accounted for, and yeah, taxes get away from you. when all of a sudden you have a $10,000 or $50,000 error, those little things. So that was a very challenging.
Sneak up on you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
The bookkeeping and just staying on I always call it the boring side of business, that just needs done. But
yes,
that's where growth and stability happens. That's where it has to be
right,
rooted there.
right.
Um,
I love spreadsheets. I wish to God I did them to the degree I do them now, and I'm tracking somebody else's money. But anyway, yeah. So those little fastidious details, those are really, how to keep track of the money that you get, because those sunshiny days are not as often as we all would like. Oh,
yeah. What about some leadership roles or tactics that you learned as a CEO there? How are you applying those today as your position as job
well,
coordinator?
it's funny. I also studied martial arts. I've been studying that for a long time. Currently study Brazilian Jiu Jitsu at Valco Brazilian Jiu Jitsu Academy. And honestly, I think the best leader traits you can have is going into that kind of environment and watching how the black belts teach people, from the newest white belt to the friend brown belt that's been there for how many years, to the person that's just trying to get in shape, and to watch the variance of interaction. Jay Valco is really a master, and I've known him for 25 years. We worked together at the Board of Trade. But also too, this woman Emily Ramirez that I work with, this ballerina, the way that she runs her business and the rehearsals, the kindness that she shows, the leadership, and then very much no, let's look at this idea. I'm not going to just say no to this idea. I'm going to give you the honor of vetting out your thoughts. I've seen Jay do that with certain people about, well, wait, why would you go for this move versus that? Let me hear your thinking. Enabling people and having them express their opinion in a way that you're treating them with respect and not just telling them what to do. I think that's I think that's a very important thing, because you're not always going to be there. Craig, I got my head in the pit. I got my clerks looking at the desk. If they don't know what to do, I'm screwed. I'm going to get the wrong order, and it's over. So if you don't train them how to do it, then just take over in that magic moment when everything's against the wall. That's wrong. You have to. I love redundancy. I should know how to be the clerk, the broker, the runner. The runner should know how to be the clerk, and back and forth. Everybody should know how to cover everyone's job, because in that environment too, you got to go on vacation. Somebody's got to
Let's
eat.
hope so, right?
I mean, we're not so
Yeah,
big. We're a very small company. So it was just that. So that kind of leadership, I think, is very, um, very soft, and
yeah,
it's more of an invitation to follow than a command to lead. Because if you command to lead these days, whatever, I don't want to go work for a corporation. I didn't do that. I could have, but I
yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I agree with you there. So tell me about your day to day now. What do you do today and for the company?
Well, I bring in and analyze all the bid opportunities, the requests for proposals, the RFPs that everyone sends out. We do everything from houses to schools to hotels, some couple data centers lately. So,
Mm.
and a lot of
Everywhere, right? Everywhere.
whatever's coming up. We'll do into to VA jobs and schools, stuff like that. Like I said, CPS is a difficult client, so is the VA. So I get in all the proposals, I sort them in an Outlook. I have two estimators that we work with, and we assign the proposals, who's going to bid this, and then I track it. I have, I think, probably 30 or 40 requests looking here just to April 10th. So over the next 3 weeks, we got about 40 jobs to bid. So we've got to get all those schedules out, keep track of any addendums that come out from those, update the plans accordingly. And then once we land a job, I get that job in, we put it in, of course, our awarded job file, and then track that job for any cost impacts and changes, as you coordinate with the other scopes. The
Gotcha.
HVAC guy is always putting his vents in with our pipes, and so it's always that dance of, well, okay, well, how do we do this? And so, but it works. I mean, that's the
Gotcha.
kind of stuff you can't, like they did to me in the Board of Trade. You can't put this on computer. You have to have a human
Hands
being there.
on.
You have to have the plumber there putting this pipe in. It's just never going to change. So,
Yeah. Is the majority of your guys' business RFP led, or do you
yeah.
guys go for business?
Yeah, no, we get a lot of the building connected website, Procore, stuff like that. We're onto those, and then they send us invitations. I'll probably get 100 emails a day. There are other platforms. Plan Hub and different stuff like that that we could pay to join to be on to ask people to look at our plumbing numbers, and we don't see that as, really we have a lot of opportunities now. We're very fortunate. We've been going since 1970. So a lot of people know us and our name's been
Yeah.
around. So we have some requests, but we're always trying to evolve, and we have a sister company that's called All Mechanical that's working with us with labor. It's an MBE company, Minority
Mm,
Business Enterprise, and that's of course a big move in the construction industry as well.
yeah. Yeah. Now you with what I'm sensing because I just met you today, have a personality.
Oh, good.
How I I we made a shift in my agency a couple years ago that we don't answer RFPs anymore because I
Mm.
feel like it might be industry specific, but I feel like we have so much more to bring to the table rather than just a quote of just a piece of paper. But maybe in your guys' industry, it's kind of the norm. But
Well,
how do you blend, your relationships, which I kind of think you value your relationships, but having your RFPs and your quoting and sales process kind of being faceless, or are they
It's
faceless? Is
no,
that a,
it's
was
not.
that
It's
a
the
bad
it's the
assumption?
same group pretty much. You only have so many GCs and stuff
Hmm.
like that. And granted, there are a lot that come from different parts of the country that use those websites to find us, and that's great. But our normal customers, our number one customer uses that platform as well. And then what ends up happening is you have that handful of customers that, oh, Jimmy's looking for this. Oh, look, Steve's looking for that. Nancy's looking for this. Great, no problem. And they do very much use the email method. And yeah, I remember being on the phone for hours at Schulhoff every day. And I don't get on the phone more than maybe twice a day. It just doesn't happen. People don't want to talk to each other anymore. It's all an email
Yeah.
request, and that's fine. But yeah, I still do get everything with my customers that I like. And then of course, everything's talked through. If you get, like a poker game, if you get down to that last table, okay, let me talk to you. And then we sit down, and the Zoom's really been wonderful for that. We don't have
Yeah.
to all march into the general contractor's office and meet your competitor in the lobby, as you're going between scope meetings. That's all done. So,
Gotcha.
so you do end up having the conversations. And then the reality is you find those moments where specifically my plumber is looking at this job going, why are you doing that? Why the vents here? That's stupid. No wonder it's so expensive. Hey, have you thought about doing X, Y, or Z and value engineering the job, or at least changing something? Why don't you make the bathrooms back to back, for God's sakes? What are you doing? Oh, right. Okay. So those are the conversations that always have to happen in person or on the phone. And then all of a sudden you have the reaction and then the redesign, really. You
Mm,
put in an RFI and you're like, well, come on, you got beautiful bathrooms that are right next to each other in this place. Put the toilets back to back and save money on pipe. Simple as that. And so those are the little details that end up forcing the communication that is absolutely required in any industry.
yeah. So kind of in your sales process, the RFP, the process, that's kind of the qualifier. But then once it gets down the funnel a little bit farther, it's the relationship, it's the human interaction.
They even have the general contractors have different crews, as you would imagine. The group of people that greet you, that ask for the proposal, that, hey, what's going on? They're very friendly. And then when you get the job, they're gone. And now it's a new guy. And that person is beating you up a little bit, going, well, hold on. Now you got to do this. You got to do this in 3 days. What do you mean 4 days? I didn't say that. And then, well, yeah, the other guy did. Well, oh, no, now we're going to get you in the box. We want you. And I mean big people, AECOM, Tish, big dogs, W.E. O'Neill. This is what they do. Walsh.
Mm,
You want to work with Walsh? I mean, these are big companies that if you make a mistake, they'll chew you up. They're not here to hold your hand.
yeah.
So, that's the combination where you have to know what you're doing. And it is, but I'm 12 years into this here at this company. I'm like, oh no, we're being traded off to the non-friendly group now, or the people who are going to run the job. And it's not their business to be my friend. It
Right.
is a friendship relation, kind of request when you're asking for the bid. So it's interesting how that changes.
Yeah. Yeah. What does for your guys' company, um, Carrozza,
Yeah.
Carrozza,
Yep. Our
nice.
Carrozza,
I'm,
Rocky,
I'm hitting it.
Rocky Carrozza.
Rocky Carrozza.
Hmm.
What's growth look like for you guys?
Well, it's looking good. Like I said, our partnership with All Mechanical, the MBE part of this business reality now. You have to be flexible. Um, we're implying new strategies for bidding, new software, and then new software on the other end, keeping track of all, of everything and making sure the
Efficiency.
profits are what you thought they would be. So yeah, we're very much evolving to try and get slicker and faster, and embracing the technology that's coming our way, and holding on to the old fashioned show up at your door and give you what you need, the service you need, and call you back, that type of service too. We're trying to be a mix of both.
Yeah. I'm sure it already has, but how are you guys embracing AI and how is it affecting or disrupting your as industry? 'Cause I'm
Um,
sure it is.
well,
It's
the
hitting
industry, I'm
everybody
not
everywhere.
really sure. I don't know how well I could speak of that, but there are two people that have just come into this company recently, and they're younger. Our new CEO is Juliana, who's the president's daughter. She is now coming into the company and running things, and she embraces AI. She's like, "Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to look at it this way. We're going to see what we can use, what theories, what advice,
Yeah.
you analyze the result." And it's very nice. She's not dismissing anything, and so we don't always use it, but we're being aware of it. And somebody said to me, "It's not the people who, AI isn't going to put people out of work, but the people who know how to use AI will have a better chance of keeping their job."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I'd
mean,
say something very similar. It's the
yeah,
AI isn't gonna take your job, but the person that knows AI is.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
do you think, I love Excel. I mean, you think I'd be, if I saw my dad again in heaven, I'd be like, "Oh, dad, I am the best Excel programmer now. I mean, I am so good at typing. I am such a good type, but I need to do these things." You have to embrace what you have to embrace to
Yeah.
quantify the risk that people are taking with their money. And basically, in my opinion, you have to create a good spreadsheet so you can explain everything to the accountant, because that's the one in the scope meeting who's going to make
Mm,
the decision whether that job moves forward or not. So, it's you really have to understand and present the cost. If you're putting in a suspended overhead sewer and they don't understand why it costs that much, but they're tired of the sewage backing up on the floor. Okay, fine. I can explain that to you. And here's a spreadsheet to show you why it costs so much. Because what you have to do, you have to lift, you have to get pumps, you have to do this and that. So if you just give people a big number, they don't understand it. If you break it down, show the cost, and get into the details of whatever, you can have an AI um, explanation for the scope. We've done that. We've gone
mm,
through and say, "Hey, here's what we're trying to do," and then we have AI revise it. And like I'm doing with my stand-up comedy and stuff like that, you have to revise it. You have to be succinct. If you can take a three sentences and make them into two, being more succinct and more to the point, you actually get the respect of your audience or client a little bit more, because you're like, "Oh, you're pretty smart."
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, never use 100 words when 3 will do, right?
As I'm kind of living the opposite right now. But yes, in general, we always try and be very succinct, and that's something my whole life I've struggled with. But it's really neat to get on stage and hear laughter, and okay, there's your success. So it's real easy to
Mm,
do it again because
yeah.
you just proved it.
But instant
Silence.
feedback is gold, right?
Yeah, and when you talk for 10 seconds and then you get silence at the end of your joke, you're like, okay, noted.
Noted. Yeah, yeah. That one's getting cut.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah,
So
yeah. But what are some words of wisdom that you have for our audience of anybody, starting out in their professional career or, in leadership because you're a CEO, now you're kind of heading up I don't know about a department or division, but you're a key person within
running
the
the
company.
estimating department. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I I would say, respond to your customers quickly. I sat at a lovely restaurant, Maple and Ash, with some customers from Belgravia, and it was a wonderful big developer. They're all across the country, and we did some projects with them, and they said, "Oh yeah, we 5 bathrooms, beautiful, beautiful places, and every bathroom had different upgrades." So they send out their stuff, and I would respond right away. "Got it, working on it. 309C. We'll get it back to you next Tuesday." Boom, done. So we're sitting there at the lunch, and I said, "Oh, I always try and respond immediately to my customers," and they both burst out laughing. They're like, "Oh my God, John." We know right away when you've gotten our emails. You tell us right away, I don't, did I get it? I'm going to get it back to you by Tuesday. And they were laughing. And I'm like, well, who doesn't do that? Oh my God, so many people don't do that. I'm like, well, that's stupid.
Mhm.
You guys are multi-million dollar huge company. We're buying wonderful Kohler material from Studio 41. Look at all the people that are now making money because of this contact. Yeah, I'm going to respond to you right away. And that was the Board of Trade. That was the Board of Trade going, hey, if you don't respond, I'm going over there to Fred. I'll give Fred that order. And then your boss is going to be mad at you because you missed that order. So I would say, yeah, just even if you don't have the answer that your customer wants, let them know you're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a resolution, but there needs to be some communication, right? Yeah.
Especially in this society. I mean, people text and, I got you, working on it.
Yep. Yeah. Simple thing.
Mhm.
What else you got? What else you got? You're entering the latter part of your career, right? So there's
Yeah,
probably some younger people around.
yeah.
How are you navigating that? What advice would you have, or do you impart upon the new employees or the younger people that are joining your staff?
That's funny. Yeah, there is a lot of, I used to be very gregarious and talking to people much more so than even now. But yeah, you start to do get that, yeah, okay, thanks, old man. I don't want to hear it, and so, if you get asked some opinion, sure, I'll always offer an opinion if asked. But a lot of times I do start to cut myself short and realize these kids don't want to hear it, and then if they do want to hear it, great, but, um, like I usually get called an old man in whatever environment I'm in, whether it's I'm on stage or working in this little theater group. It's fun. They make jokes about me, and I'm like, and I'll take it. And then the same thing with this morning. I'm the only one with gray hair in my jujitsu class, but I'd rather be the oldest guy at the gym than the youngest guy at the retirement home. So, I guess the only advice I can give is just to show up and be there. And then the kid's gonna look at you and be like, it's 5:30 in the morning. That old guy's here, and so just your example is all you got. Your word, Board of Trade taught me that your word's all you got. If you want to lie for $3,000, so
Yeah,
okay,
right.
but really, because it's just a microcosm of the entire shell of who you are. So if you're not going to stand up for what's right and what's wrong and the price, honor a price that you made. We try very hard to honor our prices and explain to our customers what the cost impact is. And that trust builds contracts and builds buildings. And then we go to the next one and we're like, yeah, if this company's, maybe you don't get 30%, but I don't want 15, 10%, but give me 20. Just I'll be honest, you be honest. Nobody needs to gouge. And
Yeah.
like hogs get fed and pigs get slaughtered, right? Is that what it is? So pigs
Something
get
like
fed,
that.
hogs
Yeah.
get slaughtered, excuse
Hogs
me.
get slaughtered. Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
I just try and be fair to everybody. And again, you can even go back to the Loyola Academy and me. Treat others the way you want to be treated. That's all I got. I don't care what
Yeah.
religion you are. Treat
It's
others,
that simple, right? It's that simple.
period. So yeah.
What you talked about your 941s and those payroll taxes that don't go away.
Yeah.
What are some other lessons you learned the hard way?
Um, a lot about people's lives. My wife is a lawyer, and she's talking about the fact that she'll ask somebody a question about was the light red or green, and the response will be start. Well, I was going to pick up my mom, and she's sick, and then we're going. Hold on, was the red or green? But she'll let him get through it. Is her point? She's like, I have to let him get through that. So
Mm,
letting people have that emotional event, letting people, giving them the respect that you yourself would like. I mean, maybe it's not the most prescient moment, but I in my past will get very impatient, and I've had to realize that at times, whatever my employee was talking about or whatever, this is very important to them, and treat them with respect. I work with them. I don't like to say they work for me. I didn't like saying that. It just felt weird. I work with them.
yeah,
If they're not there, I don't get an order. So just that. I mean, treating the others like you want to be treated because it never ends.
yeah, that's a good one. Always is.
You know?
Some of the best business practices and advice that we get is always the most simple. It's just people just muck it up.
Well,
I feel like
Harvard wants you to make you think it's the most complicated thing in the world. My brother went to Harvard, so God bless him, and God bless, and it's true. I wish I had the ability and the money and the finances to go and learn all those angles. But from what I did glean from the people who did go to Harvard at the Board of Trade that I worked with is they had their angles. and they knew how to play people to get what they want. And you can phrase it as this is a implementation of this kind of strategy and this and that. Sure, it's also a manipulation to get what you want, and so if your overall agenda is profit, you're going to go ahead and step on some people's emotions and even maybe some of your morals on the way. So you got to kind of watch that and make sure that you're listening to the conversation and not just telling people what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, where can people learn more about you? If I'm not sure, are you active on social?
Yeah,
And
I'm
also,
I'm on
Rocky,
Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and our Carrozza website. We're online, www.artcarrozza.com, and we're doing some exciting projects. We're trying to change the skyline of the city one building at a time.
excellent, excellent. Well, Sean, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to give your unique past and unique perspective on life and your career and people coming up through their journey, because it takes all types of perspectives. It's not just one approach that wins it or always is successful. It's usually a fragmented weave of webs that get people where they need to be or should be.
Right.
So I appreciate you taking time out for
Well,
us.
I'm definitely one of those solid C students that just kept trying. Work hard, keep trying. And Steve, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Everybody stick around. More content to come. Subscribe. Go follow Sean. If you're in the Chicago area, look for him. Go find him on stage somewhere and
Abs
look
Comedy
for
Club.
there we go. There we go. All right, everybody. Thanks, Sean. Thanks again. And we'll be back soon. Take care.